Hello and welcome to The Hero's Spouse. I'm Kenda Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Today we have an anonymous, left behind, and forward-moving spouse with a bomb drop of September 26th, 2022, a date of marriage of 2000. Has a clinging boomerang who is a low-energy wallower. This is a little bit longer of an explanation or question than most because I received this by email. She says, I've had news this week that is pushing me even further to break, and I'm doing my best to hold it all together. I also have had contact, text of course. I just wanted to hear your views. Do you still think it's midlife crisis, or is he just not a very nice person? Or not the person I ever thought he was? So my son, 14, has been diagnosed with either Crohn's or colitis, and he's waiting investigation. Crohn's runs in the family. But he thinks this has been triggered by an event, and high stress from the divorce, the abandonment, and leaving can be causing that. I'm absolutely devastating. This has been a lifelong sentence of being housebound for my brother for 30 years, and I don't want that for my son. So due to this, there's been a little bit more contact. My MLCer is, of course, sticking his head in the sand. Last weekend, he called to drop something off for one of the kids. And I had a friend of my son's, and he came to the house, and behind me, he could hear laughter, but he couldn't see who it was. He asked, who was in the house? I said it didn't matter. He asked again, and I said, it doesn't matter. He reached past me and tapped the inside of the doorframe with a huge smarmy grin and said, it's still my house. He's still not involved or even looking to be involved with anyone, but at the weekend he sent a text saying that he would like to be able to come over to the house to paint the fence, maintain the garden, and things like that. He said he also wants to come in to visit our son. Our 14-year-old son has been to his place twice for 20 minutes, and our 17-year-old has never been there. He then dropped a bombshell with his son, with our 14-year-old. He said that he has only been wearing his wedding ring when there was a possibility that our 14-year-old might see it. This has been giving him false hope and mixed messages and leading to one very upset child. My MLCer just kind of texted him, sorry, and then messaged me to say, why can't we have a friendly relationship? So instead of saying nothing, which I've been trying hard to do, I replied, because you don't really want a friendship. You want a clear conscience. Stepping out for a minute, I'm just going to say I loved that response. Because as I was reading it, I was thinking of responses, and you did so much better than what I was thinking of. That was beautiful. Not just that because you don't want it, but you want a clear conscience. I loved that. She went on, I was your friend, your best friend, and 7 months ago, you shattered absolutely everything without warning. He said at the end of the day, that is what I want. So I sent him a message with some questions to answer since he was in a talkative mood and eager for friendship. He said he didn't consider anyone's feelings. He was being selfish, and he's sorry for the way things are. He says he's never been unfaithful or even talked to anyone else and has no plans to do so. He plans to provide for us for the rest of our lives, but doesn't want us to divorce or separate unless we both want it. I asked him if he thought there was anything wrong with his behavior or mood, and he said no. He said he doesn't really confide or talk to anyone. He literally goes to work, rides his bike, or plays in his band and comes home. Alone. He says that ultimately he wanted to leave, and he did. He didn't want to be married anymore. He still likes me and cares for me as a person. Glad to know that I'm a person. But stopped having romantic feelings for me. He never stopped caring. He just stopped wanting to be in a relationship. My head is a mess. I was doing well, better, but not great. But the issues with my youngest, between mental health and now this life-changing illness, facing it all alone is kind of overwhelming. Do you see MLC in what he's saying? Or do you just see a selfish man that has had enough? What do I do? What's the right course of action? Do I begin to text him on a daily basis to keep him informed of the children? Do I cut him off altogether? I was holding onto a glimmer of hope that I didn't even actually see, but now, I don't know. I also feel that he's delusional about the friendship thing and don't know what that really is about. Well, he probably is delusional about it. You can be friends, but at this point, it can be confusing because early on in the crisis, I do like it when you work to rebuild the friendship. But at the same time, there is the thought in them that, oh, I could just be that. The message is, I'm doing this for this. I am doing this because I'm a stand-up for our marriage and I don't think it's what's best. Or I'm doing this because it's the appropriate thing to do. I don't want you doing, he wants to be your buddy, not your friend. So let's talk about the difference between a buddy and a friend. A buddy is somebody that just wants you there and available on their terms. A friend is somebody you can call and count on in times of need or not need. So Chuck and I have a friend who many years ago, on a holiday weekend, I don't know why our friend wasn't doing something, because he's the kind of guy that's always doing something on those weekends, but we were traveling up the pass, towing our boat, and a tire went out, top of the pass. Full traffic, and we can't go anywhere, completely busy, everything is busy. We called this one friend. I don't know why we thought to call that one. We said, can you do this for us? He went to the store, bought a new tire for the boat, drove it up to us on the pass, so several hours just to get to us. And then they fixed this. He dropped everything to come and help us. What did he get in return other than thank you from you're our friend? That's a friend. A buddy, that's too casual. A buddy wouldn't do that. We wouldn't even called a buddy. Your husband right now, that's all he can give is buddiness. And you can tell him, I don't want to be your buddy. I want to be your friend. But what you're asking me for is to be your buddy. And that is friendship, or that is a relationship on your terms at my expense. So it's not just on your terms, but it's at your expense. And that is not what you want. That's not going to be healthy for you. Look what it's doing to your children. And you know that. So it makes a lot of sense that your head is a mess. Is this a midlife crisis, or is he just a selfish guy? So the way I determine that is I can determine the midlife crisis part, or is he just a selfish guy? Well, was he selfish before this? You were married for 22 years at Bomb Drop. Was he like that at all? Would you have described him for those 22 years plus your courtship as selfish in that way? If you would, if you're seeing pieces of that, then maybe that's who he is. Maybe he's not a very nice person, but when we've talked, that is not what you've said about him. This new persona is a new persona. That is one reason, and it's a big reason, that I say this is a midlife crisis. The other, he left you. He's not interested in anybody else. He's not interested in finding anybody else. And from what we've talked about, I haven't sensed that there's an energy of another person. We could be wrong. And that's not uncommon that they are hiding that person well. But let's just assume that's not the case, because the energy isn't there. Who does that? Who just up and says, man, I don't want to be married anymore. There's nothing wrong with you. There wasn't anything wrong with our marriage. I'm just tired of it. I don't want it. I'm going to leave. And knowing this, because at least later on, he has admitted that he was being very selfish. And yet he didn't really apologize. He said, it's the kind of apology you give, and this is okay sometimes, when you tell somebody, I'm sorry that this happened to you, or I'm sorry for your loss. It's great to be told I'm sorry for your loss, but you're not accepting an accountability. He said, I'm sorry for the way things are. You made them the way they are, though. What does your being sorry and his being sorry, what does that mean? I want to know from him. You've told me you're sorry for the way things are. What does that mean? Because if you're sorry for the way things are, and the way things are due to your actions, inactions, and they're of your creation, then what is there to be sorry for? And you can be sorry for actions that you felt were necessary, but that you had to do. I mean, you have a double bind. You have this choice or this, the standard example of this track with one person and this track with 5 people, and they're all on it, and you're on a train. Are you going to switch which, and you're going to hit somebody? Which do you do? It's a double bind. And you're going to say, I'm sorry. But you're not accountable in like being the bad person. You had to choose one or the other. But he is accountable. This isn't that kind of situation. Or is it? In midlife crisis, it's not consciously that kind of situation. It is an absolute compulsion, and they don't know why. You are being pulled, and you don't know how or why, to this escape, to this inner place. And you just can't not go. And you don't have an explanation. But to not heed the call may cause panic and anxiety, and you don't know why. So, for example, at one point, soon after bomb drop in Chuck's crisis, I was visiting my mom. Chuck had, I think, just moved out. And there was a month where he was moved out, but before the affair was physical. And so this was in this period. He'd probably been out maybe a week. Or it was another time. It was one of those times. But I'm thinking of a couple different times I visited her. But on this particular occasion, it was Sunday, and my mom is in the fellowship hall at church getting coffee service ready. I'm sitting in church with Grandma. I'm up in the front row, and we're getting through communion, and suddenly it was like a panic attack in me. Except that I wasn't feeling panic and anxiety, but my body was giving it off. And it was saying, go now, go home, go home, go home. And what the panic was if I didn't heed that call, it was going to get worse. My heart rate was going up. I had no idea why. What is this new thing? And I'd had this feeling, I don't think this was the first time, but this was the first really major time. And what it was, go home now. He's there. You will see him. He's there. You've got to go. I didn't know why I had to see him, any of that. But if I went home then, he would be home. I was 100 miles away. I looked at Grandma. I went up to communion and said, Grandma, I don't know why I have to leave. I went out to my mom. I said, I don't know why. I have to leave. I have to get home now. I was going to leave in probably 15 to 20 minutes anyway. But this was now. I drove 100 miles. He had been on the doorstep. Maybe he'd been home for 2 minutes. So I hit a bullseye. And I said earlier, this was before the relationship was physical. This was the night after it became physical. She was there in the car. But my point is this compulsion. And it's a call. And if you do not heed the call, the physiological responses get worse. The mental responses become worse. You become more panicked, and it won't let up until you do what the compulsion says you must do. Go, go, go. For me, it was go, leave church, leave Grandma, leave my mom, and get home now. And it had to be urgent because it was a 100-mile trip. If it was, in town, it probably wouldn't have been as urgent. This is kind of what they are feeling, but we don't know what it is they have to go to or leave from and why. But the body puts out this absolute panic. And if they don't respond, and they try not to, they stamp it down, they suppress, they repress. But it gets worse, and it gets louder and louder and louder. And it has now finally gotten to such a cacophony inside of them that they can't not do something about it. Because if they don't, it's affecting their life also. It is spilling out by anxiety, by anger, any ways they're doing to avoid it, they're going to start showing in their real life. And you'll start noticing. They had to do it and they don't know why. We don't know why. And when I say we don't know why, I don't mean mentally looking at the psychology behind it, but we don't know why, the specifics in their situation, what they're running from, what it is they have to go to. But not going, not doing whatever that call is, has consequences. And that's what I mean when I say they can't, it's not that they can't help it, but they have to do it. And it's not a full choice. I chose to heed the call, but there's a consequence for not heeding the call. And the part of the consequences is extreme depression, panic, anxiety. And those things can burst out in things like anger as well. They will come out in relationships now. And they already are, because we're so confused that we put up obstacles. Okay. So let me get back into this and see where I was. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute. He plans to provide for you for the rest of your lives, but doesn't want you to divorce. Who knows? But that's probably where he is right now. He just wants to heed this call. He might not be aware of it as that, but he knew he couldn't do anything but. And for that, what should you do? You give him the space. Does that mean you leave him completely alone? And that's some of the core of your question right now. What is the right course of action? Do you text him daily? No, you don't text him daily. You can keep him informed about the children, but not on a daily basis. Now, if he texts you to ask daily, sure, go ahead and respond. But not if it is incessant. Poke, poke, poke. Hey, why haven't you texted me back? Why haven't you texted me back? Just respond. And if it's not a necessary text. But if he's asking about the kids, and especially it's a medical thing, follow his lead on that. You don't need to cut him off altogether. You said you were holding on to a glimmer of hope. Even though you didn't see it, you were holding it. Here's the problem I see with that. Is when you and other people have said, I was holding on to a glimmer of hope, you're looking for results of that hope. You're putting an expectation into it. And you're looking for results of that hope now, when it's only about 7 months after bomb drop. If MLC lasts 3 to upwards of 7 years, the thing that you want to see from that hope isn't going to show itself to you for years. You'll think it's showing itself to you sometimes because of the mixed messages that come through. So you may not have had this, but some will. Their MLCer gives up the alienator or no alienator, but they come home, okay, I want to work on it. Or they haven't left, but they come home saying, okay, we'll go to counseling, I want to work on it. And they might even do it. But 7 months after bomb drop, that's not going to last. And you're going to be fooled if you don't accept MLC. If all you had was the glimmer of hope, and you're like, oh, look, it worked. It will crash again. And my concern for that is if you don't accept the process of a midlife crisis, that this is a midlife crisis, when it crashes again, you'll feel you had another bomb drop. You'll think, oh, it really is over. You'll demonize them. They had a chance and they didn't take it. It's can versus will, though. They won't work on our marriage. They are refusing to work on our marriage now because they came home. They took back their I love you, but I'm not in love with you. They tried. They don't have the capacity. It is a can't right now, not a won't. Remember that compulsion, that thing that is saying go, 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 and pulling them away and to not do it. They're trying to stifle it when they come home with that mixed message. Some of them stifle it for a whole year. And then a year later, after they've come home, It's just not working. I can't do it. And you thought everything was fine, or you thought it was going okay, but they can't do it. And yesterday they told you everything was fine too, just like at bomb drop, when you had known nothing before. The next day, and if you don't do that, you think you have another bomb drop, and it will be. It'll feel that way. It's not a new crisis. It is still the same arc of the crisis, and your MLC, or your husband or wife, was still in midlife crisis during that year you thought things were getting better, because that's how MLC can work. Sometimes it's an MLC vacation. They take a vacation from the tunnel of MLC, and things seem great. Sometimes it's just, they might be standing up on top of the tunnel where they can get a little air, see the freshness, have a little bit more clarity. So you can tell they're still in crisis. They're still riding a wild tunnel, but there's a little more clarity, not fully out of the tunnel. Either way, full vacation where they seem normal, or just a little bit of clarity, they're going to go back in. Now, if they don't do that, and wait, mine's been out, and it's been 8 years. First thing, it could happen. Those are the rare cases. But MLC, in those cases, if they did not finish their crisis, if you start the crisis and you don't finish it, you will need to go back in later. Unless you die in the meantime. Sorry. They will need to go back in later and finish that crisis. They will go in, and it will often be a worse crisis. That's where I consider 2 bomb drops. You have 10 years between. They're yanked out at the beginning. They didn't finish their crisis. There could be 10 years in between. That's not uncommon that I see it be a 10-year gap. If it's a 2-year gap, you're in the same crisis as before. This 10-year gap, new crisis, maybe same issues, because it's the trauma that's boiling up inside them. But they also have 10 more years of stuff. It's only 2 years. This crisis had still been ongoing under the surface right there. And they're going to go away again. Mentally, physically, both. So that glimmer of hope, I want you to put it away. Because you're not going to see the results of that hope for a few years. And if you're worried because MLC gets worse before it gets better, and we've talked about that. But then when it does get worse this soon, and that's when it does, 7 months in, it's still getting worse. You're like, that glimmer of hope, it's not working for me. No, it's not working for you. I'm sorry, it's not, because it's not ready. Let's take the hope, just like other things I've used with the box metaphor. You take your marriage and that glimmer of hope and stick them in a box. Put them on a shelf and take them out in a few years. You're putting them on a shelf because you're saying, we can't work on our marriage right now. And if we try, it's just going to do more damage to it. So I'm going to put it on a box where it's protected. Nothing can get to it. That box is protected. It's keeping it away from the elements. And I'm going to live my life. And I'm going to live my life knowing this guy is crazy. Knowing this guy is not going to hold himself accountable. And he's going to run from accountability. And that he's scared of it. He's scared of what this means. Right now, your son's new diagnosis might send him further. It can be what will help the MLC gets worse part. Because, oh my God, I did all these things, and it's just this cascade, snowballing and piling on more and more crap. A crisis could bring them out, but only when they are already ready. 7 months in, no. The reason that glimmer of hope that you were holding, even though you couldn't see it, isn't working is because he's not ready for it. So I don't want you to think about it in that way. Otherwise, hope has become an evil instead of the good that it can be to help you. The hope that I want you to have is recognizing what MLC is and can be, and that it's a long thing. If you don't accept that it's long, then it's going to be a lot harder for the crisis for you. And that's for everybody, not just the one person I'm talking to, because I'm talking to all of you. MLC is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's one of those ultra marathons. Okay? I know this has been a long video, but it has some things that I want all of you to take really into heart. This is a crisis. And if you don't use your hope wisely, but you think that I have hope because I saw these good signs, but it's only been a few months, you might interpret these wrong. You might take the mixed messages too much to heart. And that is going to put you in a place where now you say, well, he doesn't want to work on it, and I gave him the chance. You can give him as many chances as you want. It doesn't matter. They're not going to take them and really work with them. Oh, they might try and take the chance, and they try, and they try. Trying presupposes failure, and they will fail over and over again. Sometimes they really meant to try. But they're in a crisis. It's not about your marriage. It's like saying, I want to fix this part of my body, but I have a broken leg. I want to run this thing, but I have a broken leg. And why can't you run? Why can't you run? Well, there's a bone sticking out of my thigh. But why can't you run? You're a runner. Why can't you run? There's a bone sticking out of my side. The midlife crisis is the bone sticking out of their thigh. It's still there. The fracture that is their midlife crisis at 7 months hasn't even been set. Now, once the fracture is set, they need surgery. Once the surgery, you need time to heal. You're going to walk with a limp. It's years of recovery. But in the beginning, we expect the recovery to be now. It's not going to happen that way. And until we accept that it's not going to happen that way, it's going to be a really hard crisis for us. It's going to be hard detaching, hard accepting, hard forgiving, hard having empathy, hard having the compassion for them. Okay? But acceptance means now, okay, they're in a midlife crisis, I can't do anything. But what I can do is focus on me. You can keep up your contact, smart contact with him, absolutely. And only to the level that you can handle it. If it is becoming toxic for you, even if he's not toxic, but just you're not detached enough, then reduce it. But smart contact, yeah. Keep him involved with the kids. And they're old enough to choose that level of involvement as well. Okay? I know it's hard. But I know you can do it. And this was a really long question, so I may have missed some pieces in the middle. So sorry if I did, just let me know, and I will come back to them, okay? For everyone else and for you, I hope this is helpful. I will see everybody in the next question.